Hey, welcome back to True Print for Life. I'm your host, Christina Vera.
And I'm your co-host, Maylin and Sambois. Today, we're so excited to be with you. Thank you so much for joining us. We have a special guest, someone that I had the privilege to meet almost a year ago. And you're going to get to hear a lot more about him. But he's an executive coach and a mindfulness coach. And he'll tell you a little bit more about what he does. So today, we have Juan Alvarez with us. Welcome, Juan.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here with you.
Well, we are so excited to have you, Juan. I had the privilege of just reading more about you and the really amazing, remarkable work that you do. And so as Maylin mentioned, you are an educator, a mindfulness coach. Can you share with our listeners, like, what does that mean? And like, what is it that you get to do with people every day?
Right. Well, there are several aspects or dimensions to the work I do. One aspect of it is the work I do one-on-one with executives, entrepreneurs, CEOs, people that have built companies. And I work with these individuals one-on-one. And the type of coaching that I do, it's more directed towards helping them grow themselves rather than any particular business skill or strategy or execution pertaining to business. So I work with the person, and that's where like most of my work happens right now, one-on-one, helping them gain awareness of where they are, mental processes, emotional processes, how what happens inside of them impacts the way they lead their companies and the way they make decisions and things like that. That's where I use a lot of mindfulness techniques and exercises for them to help gain that awareness. And that's the type of work I do one-on-one with the individuals. I also teach, like in group settings, mindfulness. I do retreats, and I have a few products that I offer online as well for people to learn how to meditate and learn more about how mindfulness can help you lead a better life.
So let me tell you how I met Juan, because I think everybody's wondering, well, how did you meet Juan? Let me tell you. I am part of the Create Columbus Commission here in Columbus, and we're part of young professionals that are there to really help young professionals stay in Columbus and really thrive. And we were having an executive meeting, and someone said, oh, I had a great conversation with Juan, and it just really changed my life. And somebody was like, oh my God, you know Juan? Now, I know a lot of people, and I was like, who is Juan? And you guys have such a good positive comments about him. I was intrigued. So I went ahead and Googled Juan and found Juan and reached out to him and requested to connect, to have a conversation. And then I saw a lot of people that I knew, leaders that have worked with Juan and had great things to say. And at the moment where I reached out to him was because I was going through so many transitions and I felt like a little bit out of control. And I was like, I just need to be centered. And I don't know what I need, but I need to talk to Juan. And I feel like I was guided to Juan. So thank you so much for that conversation. And then from there, Juan offered a retreat a couple months after. And I said, well, I'm going to go because we love retreats. Christina and I can live for retreats all day. And I signed up. And it was in New York. You guys know I'm from New York. So I get there. And I get to say, I'm always late. So I got late a little bit. But I get there, as they were getting ready to start. And I looked at the agenda. And the agenda said, meditation retreat. I said, oh, this is a meditation retreat? I had just signed up for a retreat. I had no idea it was a meditation retreat. However, I was in the path of wanting to be more intentional about meditating. So I know it was not, by accident that I got there. And it was an amazing retreat. I loved it. I recommend it. So Juan, from my retreat, I learned a lot about you. And one of the things that really inspired me was your story of how you even got into this path of executive coaching. So if you'd like to share with us a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. By accident, I think is the best way to put it. Like, I never thought I was going to be not even close to the world of business or coaching or anything like that. Like, when I was young, I thought I was going to be a mountain guide. And that's what I thought my life path was going to be. I was rock climbing all the time. It's all my time, my free time I spent in the mountains. And I started even getting ready to be a certified mountain guide.
Wow.
But then life brought me into a different direction. My father, he was an entrepreneur. Mm-hmm. He had several businesses, and he got very sick, and then he passed away. And basically, from one day to the next one, I went from aspiring mountain guide to the executive manager and CEO of some of the businesses he had. Wow. And I was like 18 back then. So that was my entrance into the business world, wow. Like totally by accident. Never had quite an interest in pursuing a career in business or anything like that. But it was a fascinating journey. Mm-hmm. It brought me into almost 18 years of executive management. I worked a little bit in my dad's company, and we did good work there for a few years. Then I sold it, and the inertia took me to other endeavors, and I ended up leading and running 6 or 7 other companies in my career. Some of them very modest, like 2 or 3 people and like barely $500,000 in revenue. Some others, large companies, like 200, 250 people, several dozens of millions in revenue. And some of them like in very different industries, like automotive, financial services, publishing and distribution of newspapers and books. I did some work for a car manufacturer as well. Like many, like I had an interesting career. By the end of it, like when I was in my mid-30s or like early 30s, I was mostly recognized as the type of executive that you would hire to help companies expand into new markets. That became kind of my specialty. So I was a CEO that people would hire when they wanted to expand into a new market or a new part of the world. That's how I started working here in the US, for example. A company from Europe wanted to enter the US market and Latin American market, and I helped them do that. Wow. That's what the type of work that I used to do. And through all of that, I always thought I was in the wrong place. Like never quite enjoyed it. Like some of the things I did went very well. Some of the things I did went very badly. But I never thought like this is my passion. This is what I want to do. Like I always had a lot of conflict and resistance to like the things I had to do in the name of business. Right. A lot of discomfort, with the way we treated people in the business world as well. I didn't align with that, like the lack of compassion, the lack of humanity in the corporate settings, always valuing more dollar signs than human experiences or things like that. I had a lot of conflict with that. And I think that had a lot to do with how I ended up becoming a coach. As I originally, when I was a little bit more mature and I started learning about coaching, then initially I went to coaching school thinking, okay, this is going to make me a better CEO, like I'm going to learn all of these skills. But halfway into this program, I realized maybe I can use this discipline that I'm learning to help transform the business world a little bit. And then by the time I was done with my program, that was like a 2-year coaching program, I decided I'm going to start coaching other executives to see if we can start doing business in a different way. Wow. Yeah. And then I started my little coaching practice. And from there, the coaching executives and coaching executives, I started realizing what these guys need is not assistance in like the business skills or leadership skills or things like that. What these guys need is meditation, which is something I learned on my own for many, many years as well. And that helped me transform also the way I experience life. So then I timidly, like very vaguely started adding some meditation or mindfulness topics into my coaching conversations with clients, and then when I realized, oh, this is working, like then I fully focused on that. And for a number of years now, I would say 6 or 7 years, exclusively what I do is kind of mindfulness-based executive coaching. Yeah.
I love that so much. And just hearing your journey, with the untimely passing of your father, and then kind of being propelled into this entrepreneurial world, and then taking that experience and really trying to figure out, okay, what is my place in all of this? And I think that's really interesting, because a lot of times we find ourselves, whether it's in careers or relationships or in situations that we are in, but we have really no control or no say as to, okay, how do I really fit in this equation? Like,
Totally.
you easily could have just stayed as this, multi-serial CEO of all these amazing companies that your family had built, but you felt this internal struggle of saying, like, no, I don't feel like this is right, or I don't feel like I'm really maximizing my purpose or my place in this realm. And so what was that like for you? Like, I know that must have been also very hard, because you stepped into this CEO role. You were really, if I understand, and you let me know if I'm saying this correctly, like, it was almost like you felt like your obligation to keep these companies going because your father's legacy. And what was that like for you to have to say, as much as you loved everything that was built there, but you wanted to take your own path?
Right. It was very difficult. And you're totally right. Like, nobody forced me to make that decision to step in, but I kind of felt that I needed to do that for my family. So I did. And there were many things at play, Well, first, I wasn't even properly grieving my dad's passing, because I was so busy with the business that complicated things, like bottling up a lot of my own pain and not being able to process properly. But then being exposed to a lot of responsibility that I wasn't prepared to take on. That was massive. And then a sense of guilt, associated with, like, I'm trapped here, and I realize that this is not my place, that this is not something I enjoy, and it's not kind, it's not nice. Like, I'm going through a lot of, like, harsh experiences, but what do I do? Like, do I think of myself and remove myself from this situation and leave everybody hanging, or do I keep going, for everybody else? It was very difficult to learn how to put myself in the focal point of my life, right? Obviously, that also led to help thousands of people that I was able to help afterwards. But in some moments, it felt wrong, and it felt selfish to leave, and scary, because at some point you keep going and you keep going and you keep going, and that becomes your profession, and there's your bread and butter, and, like, if I don't do this, what am I going to do? It's like a golden cage, It's like I'm sustaining my family with this, and it's like stepping into the abyss of the unknown. Am I good enough to do something else? I've been doing this for so long. I don't like it, but I became kind of good at it. So am I going to be good at something else? There was a lot of back and forth. But I think what helped me make the decision ultimately were, like, basically two things. A consistent exercise of honesty with myself, like, keep coming back to, if I'm sincere with myself, if I'm honest, and when I silence the mind and I listen to the heart tells me, you need to move on. You need to go do whatever you came to this world to do. And keep learning to trust that voice. Because the mind was constantly freaking out. Like, if it was for the mind, I would have not gotten anywhere. Like, I would have stayed there forever, right? So that was an important thing. And then also what helped was, like, a growing and never-ending growing discomfort Yeah. Like, I wasn't getting any more comfortable, like I was, no matter how long I've been doing that, like 17, 18 years, I was still uncomfortable there. Yeah. So that was a constant invitation to move on and to transition.
Wow. I appreciate you sharing that, because I mean, just even what you said about like calming your mind, because I think the mind, and I don't know this to be like, I'm not a doctor or I've never studied the brain in that capacity, but to your point, your mind will race so much around things that, well, what if you should be? Why aren't you? And as you stated, being able to calm your mind enough to just listen to what's in your heart and listen to, what's really even in your gut, or I don't know if that's like intuition or your discernment about this just doesn't feel right. And so when you made that decision and you decided to choose you, right? And you came to that place of saying, okay, like, I'm not going to go head first in this. I'm going to go heart first, it sounds like, in this. Did you receive like a lot of like negative response to that in terms of like your family or peers, or like, what was that like for you when you decided like, okay, I've heard what I need to hear internally. I'm going to move forward with this. I'm going to put me first. Was that openly accepted, or do you feel like you were kind of alone in that transition of that process?
No, getting to the point of the making the decision was lonely. Sometimes, like, it depends on to where you listen to. If you listen to your mind, you're very lonely. If you listen to your heart, you're accompanied there, right? But as the moment I voiced my decision, and it was kind of like a sudden decision. Like, I think it's one of those things that was cooking for a long time, and then all of a sudden, when it was the right time, boom, it just came out very naturally. I was walking with my wife in the forest one day. We were in Boston back in the day. And I just I saw it clearly. Like, I said, hey, what do you think if I do this? And I just quit my job and start building this practice. And she said, no, this feels right. So starting with her in that very moment, I started receiving a lot of support. Our family here in the US supported me a lot as well. Like, it felt very natural. One of those things that when you were telling people, it said, it kind of suits you. This is okay for you, right? What do you need? I moved in with my father-in-law. Just because I needed to take like financial risks and things like that. So a lot of support. And even in the business world, this is interesting. It was a very difficult decision to make, also because the time frame and the circumstances around my professional life were I was leading. In that moment, I was leading a merge between two companies, one German company from Europe and our company here in the US. And one of the key terms of that agreement was that I was to continue to be the CEO of that company for a number of years if the deal was to be a reality. So when I stepped out, it was not just me stepping out of a job. Like, I was blocking this deal to happen. So you would expect, a lot of resistance and conflict from the owners of the companies and things. No, none of that.
Wow.
They took it and they said, okay, you go do you. We support you. Like, you've been great to us all of these years. Now go do whatever you need to do. We'll figure this out. So I lost a lot of sleep.
Yeah.
The days prior to communicating my decision, and then all of I received back was just like kindness and understanding, even from the people I expected the least. So
wow.
It was quite easy. Much easier than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
But they say when you put in the universe or to God what you want, right? Like, it will conspire to give you right? What you want. And sometimes we are our worst enemies because we're stressed out. Like you have taught us, like, don't stress what has not come yet, right? I learned that, like, because you're stressing for something that's not here, it may never happen, and yet you lost all this sleep. But you learned that with the process. So, you know, as we talked earlier today, Christina and I, about how important it is to choose your mate. Like how your whole life could change depending on who you choose as a partner, because that's so important. So when we heard you speaking about your wife and how supportive and her family to you, like that really confirmed that. And, you know, you work with a lot of people that probably have a lot of conflict internally, but also with their partner. So how do you guide someone that you were so great because you had a supportive person, but if the person doesn't have a supportive person, you know, a CEO doesn't have, or an executive doesn't have a supportive partner, and they need to make this my focus decision. How do you guide them, or some steps that you give them to communicate this to their spouse,
right,
to help them make that transition?
Right. You don't need anything from the outside to validate your path. That's it. We keep coming to the same place. Like you validate your path and you validate your movement in the world when you look inward and you find that the voice of your heart, you know? And there you have the clarity, the confidence, and the accompaniment that you need. Whether you have support on the outside or not, I don't think it's going to block your path, you know? I've had many challenges as well, you know, and the challenge in our path is always necessary. It's part of it. It's part of our evolution as human beings. So whether you have challenge with your partner in life, or you have challenge with finances, or you have challenge with your health, or you have challenge with whatever, that's part of your path. It's part of your learning process. You know, we could not expect things to happen without any resistance, you know, or any challenge, because that's how we grow.
And that's good to know, because what I was thinking about, you come from, I don't know if we could say Hispanic or Latino heritage, right? Because you come from Spain.
Yes,
right?
I'm Hispanic,
Hispanic, right? So for our culture, you know, as you guys know, I'm Dominican, Christina's Puerto Rican, family is very important.
Right.
So, you know, when you had to sell your father's business, was that difficult for your family to accept, or was it at that time when you were, you know, listening to yourself, you fully knew?
Not quite. And that's, like, for example, I've had a lot of challenge with my family of origin. You know, I didn't have challenge with my wife or challenge with my in-laws here in the US, but I had a lot of challenge with my family of origin in my life, and that's been one of the main teachers that I had to face, you know. I didn't have challenge necessarily when I sold the business, but indirectly, you know, one of the main challenges for me was that I was let take responsibilities that were way beyond my competence and way beyond my ability at a very young age, for example, you know. And I was kind of left on my own, doing all of these things without any supervision, without any guidance, without any accompaniment, without any support or things like that. So that generated a lot of problems in my life later on, you know.
I love that you shared that, and I think it's important, you know, just to even understand, because, like, Juan, you, like, just hearing you speak, I mean, there's an energy about you, just being, like, hearing you speak, hearing your journey. And it's very refreshing, because I think, you know, nowadays, as you kind of described earlier, especially in corporate America or just in business, and even now, I think as the world has gone through so many different major challenges, whether through the pandemic or economic crisis, there seems to be this desensitization. As people we're just going through life. We're not necessarily feeling or experiencing or being present always in life. And so I think, you know, like, I would imagine you didn't just wake up one day and be this, you know, this intentional, conscious person. And so, like, who motivated you, or like what inspired you to kind of lean into yourself to become this version of you, of who you wanted to be? Was there a person or a piece of literature? Like, what really activated this version of Juan that we've met here today?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Let's see. This So whatever I have accomplished in terms of my personal evolution, whatever that is the result of a practice. A practice I've been at it for 26 years or so. Pretty much when my father passed,
Okay.
And my inspiration for this work, I think it's just like a happy combination between curiosity and suffering.
Okay.
Like all the trouble I went through when I was young, like losing my dad, all the hardship I had to face and all the adversity I had to face, trying to learn how to be a CEO. Sleepless nights, fear, people taking advantage of me, lying to me, losing money, doing really awful business, people being aggressive and hostile. All of that, like, I ended very quickly in a year and a half. I ended in a very dark spot, like very difficult, like emotionally, lots of anger, lots of fear, tons of anxiety. So that, all of that process of adversity and being curious about life, I think kind of brought me into this kind of like using my life as a laboratory to explore, like how do I tackle this? How do I get out of this? And that brought me to many things, therapy, all sorts of like personal development practices, until I found meditation. And I had a teacher. My first teacher was a Buddhist monk. He was a Spaniard, but he spent 20 years in Tibet, learning and living in a monastery. So I was exposed to this philosophy and these practices, and I got hooked. And I was very attracted to the practices and very inspired. So that became like a very important part of my life. I was a terrible student, awful. So I came in and out of the practice all the time, like I left it for years and didn't believe in it, didn't believe it was going to do anything for me. Like this worked for the monk because he was a monk, but it's not going to work for me because I'm a CEO and I'm too busy for this, or I'm too broken, or so. But that always that curiosity and the pain and the suffering, constant invitation to, hey, you're in a lot of pain. What's going on here? Let's learn about this. Let's explore this. And finally, I was getting the tools to learn about myself and to learn about how life works. And when I started using them, then it worked. So whatever you see that this is like this energy that you say, or whatever that you're perceiving, is just the result, I think, of having the right tools and a lot of work.
Yeah.
Nothing else.
I appreciate you saying that, because I think there's always been this stigma, and there is a stigma around, mental health, especially for men, and, especially not being able to really vocalize how you feel, or if you're dealing with anxiety or depression, at least here, in certain cultures and whatever culture you come from, but there's this stigma that men especially are not to talk about that, or they're supposed to shake it off, or, the term like man up, it's interesting because talking to my husband this morning, he was watching some old like war movie, and there was a soldier who was having like an anxiety attack on the front line. And the commander-in-chief came in and was like, toughen up, like shake it off kind of a thing. And, I said to him, I said, this is what's wrong with the world. And it's sad because you still see this, present day, that people are not allowed to be vulnerable, and they're not allowed to really vocalize how they feel without the fear of being judged or labeled. Whereas you said, I am feeling these things and I don't want to sit in this dark place. I want to find the tools, and I'm going to go out and figure out how I can get out of that dark space. And I really appreciate you sharing that, because I think that as a culture, we have to start really emphasizing the importance of people being able to be vulnerable enough to say, hey, I'm struggling with something here,
right,
and I need help. And so in your work and working with so many CEOs, and just based on data, we know that men fulfill a larger percentile of CEO positions, especially in Fortune 500 companies. So would you say that was very, were the men that you were working with, were they apprehensive when you started mentioning things that had to do with meditation or anything wellness related?
Right. Perhaps in earlier moments of my career as a coach, when I worked with people that were not ready, for the type of work that I do.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of resistance, and they didn't resonate at all with some of my teachings or the things that I was sharing. And nowadays, it doesn't happen at all, because I work with very special people.
Mm-hmm.
I work with a very, very tiny percentage of business leaders that are aware that whatever good they can bring into the world requires for them to find that goodness in themselves and a way to articulate it and bring it out. So they need to put things in order inside of themselves in order for them to create and bring whatever they want to bring into the world. So they already have an awareness of what they want, and they already have an awareness that they need to look inward. So that's how they confine me, because I show them the how.
Yeah.
But I don't need to sell them on the idea of what do you need to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's true. Because I think when I was looking at your website before I met you, and I saw the testimonials of some of the people that I know here, and they're males, and they're, from different backgrounds. And I was excited to see their light and the energy that they share in those videos, because I had seen some of the suffering, right? So to see some of the transformation was very inspiring.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, oh, I want that. Whatever they're having, that calmness right there, I need a little bit of that. And I thank you for that, because it takes a lot of work to really go inside. And one thing that I learned from you also was that suffering, sometimes we see it as why is this happening to me? And this is horrible. And, why me? I'm a good person. And suffering is really a way, right? Like an invitation to find you.
Exactly.
Right? To figure out what is not working, because there's a conflict. If there's suffering, there's a conflict. So what is that?
Mm-hmm.
So thank you for that teaching. I'm going to keep that.
Yeah. And I feel like we could talk to you forever, but I know we're getting ready to wrap up this particular episode. But I guess, Juan, if you could go back and just with everything you've learned and experience, what advice would you give our listeners who are maybe at the beginning point of their internal journey? If you want to think back, so what advice would you have given younger Juan, knowing what you know now, with everything you've experienced?
That's a really interesting question. I guess one of the things would be to remember, always give yourself grace. Be kind to yourself as you go through this process. You don't need to get things right the first time. It's a process. Yeah. So be kind to yourself. Be patient with yourself, but also be true to your heart. Keep trusting. Keep finding a way to listen to your heart and finding a way to feel more comfortable, and trusting your experience to that inner knowing.
Yeah.
We get distracted from it so much with the things of the world and the mind and all the noise, and the fear that comes with that. So, yeah, just trust yourself.
I love that. And if listeners wanted to get in touch with you or follow you, can you share just where can they find you?
Yeah, the best thing is to go to my website. It's juan-alvarez.com.
Okay.
And everything I do and all the resources I provide for the community, everything is there. So
Wonderful. Well, Juan, thank you so much for joining us today. I feel like we could have easily talked to you forever. Like, I feel like I have so many, I might need to make a consultation myself. Yes. I'm like, Juan, help me find
Well, there'll be other episodes as well, right?
Yes.
Well, it's been a pleasure, and thank you for the opportunity to serve.
Thank you. And here at True Print, our podcast motto, actually, every episode, we have kind of our own mantra of how we like to close our episodes. And so when we end, we always say it's bigger than you. So if you don't mind joining us as we kind of count off here silently, in closing, we would like to leave that with our listeners for today. So it's bigger than you.
Thank you so much for listening today. We're excited, and we hope that you follow us on
Instagram, True Print for Life, YouTube channel, also True Print for Life. And make sure that you share, like, watch our videos. Make sure that you follow us on all streaming platforms.